Most men don't know what to do when contact stops. She leaves, disappears, blocks you, ghosts you, or simply stops trying. You panic, you obsess, you replay it all. But let me ask you, what if you didn't? What if that silence was the door, not the punishment? What if her absence was the beginning of your rise, not your collapse? Today, I'll show you what to do when contact dies, and why it's the best thing that's ever happened to you, not just in relationships, but in life. Because real power begins when you stop chasing things that were never meant to stay. Number 1. Why silence hurts so much. Most men crumble when she goes quiet, not because she's gone, but because deep down he built his whole identity around keeping her attention. He linked his worth to her replies, his pride to her validation, and his peace to her affection. So when she stops talking, he doesn't just feel abandoned, he feels erased. It's not just the silence that stings, it's the way it reflects everything. He gave everything he tolerated. Every moment he swallowed his truth to avoid a fight, just to keep her around. He remembers the late nights, sending long texts just to hear a one-word reply. The times he forgave things that chipped at his self-respect, because walking away felt more painful than staying broken. He sees the countless moments he wanted to leave but didn't, because he thought love meant endurance, not boundaries. And now in her silence he's faced with the truth, not her truth, his that he was never truly chosen, only convenient, only useful, only there, when it suited her now. The absence of her voice reveals something he refused to see. When she was loud, how he trained himself to settle, how he twisted red flags into challenges, how he confused her inconsistency for mystery. And now as the days go by, and the texts don't come, and her presence fades, he starts to realize that silence isn't new. It's just louder now because he's finally alone with it. The silence was always there beneath the fake laughs, the passive-aggressive replies, the distracted phone checks during conversations, the affection she rationed like a prize for good behavior. She was gone long before she left. She just waited until you were too attached to notice, and now you sit there obsessing over what you did wrong, asking yourself if you could have been more attentive, more patient, more forgiving, more silent. But the truth is, your silence now is more honest than all the words you said back then, because now you're not negotiating your worth. You're witnessing what happens when a man stops chasing someone who never really stayed. And yes, it hurts, but not because you lost her. It hurts because you lost yourself trying to keep her. And now is the moment when you must stop lying to yourself about what this was and who she was. She was not your peace. She was your test. And every moment you delayed your standards to keep her. You failed it. But this is your reset. The moment you realize that silence is not punishment, it's perspective. It shows you where you overextended, who you became to be tolerated. And now the question isn't, why did she leave? It's why did you stay when the signs were screaming that you were only valued for what you gave, not who you were. And this pain you feel now is your past. Leaving your body, it's your dignity, clawing its way back. It's your mind fighting to detach from an illusion you kept feeding with hope. And now the silence is here to starve that illusion to death. No messages, no check-ins, no breadcrumb texts. Just silence, raw, real and ruthless. It's the echo of everything you ignored and everything she withheld. And now it's asking you, what will you do with it? Will you run back at the first ping of nostalgia? Will you wait, hoping she comes back? Or will you finally do what you should have done the moment she started treating you like a backup plan? Choose you not in a self-help cliché way, but in a brutal, honest way. The kind of choosing that means unfollowing, blocking, deleting, muting, whatever you need to do to protect your focus and energy, because this is where your transformation begins, when you stop seeing her silence as loss and start seeing it as liberation. Because now you have space to see the habits that made you emotionally dependent, space to confront the fear of being alone without needing her to save you. Space to build the kind of life where your joy isn't rented through her approval, but owned by your discipline. And the next time a woman tries to test you with absence, you won't flinch, because you'll know you've already sat in this silence and came out stronger. You've felt the ache of being discarded and turned it into the fire of being decided. You've stopped asking why she doesn't want you and started asking why you ever wanted her. Because love without respect is manipulation, and connection without effort is exploitation. And now you see that her silence was never rejection, it was reflection. It showed you what she valued and, more importantly, what you allowed. And now you don't allow it anymore. Now you respond to disrespect with distance, not debate. Now you answer confusion with clarity, not begging. Now you don't chase love that costs you your self-worth, because the man who survives this silence doesn't come back. He rises and becomes someone who never again settles for half-loved, half-heard, half-respected relationships. The silence didn't break him, it built him, and the next woman who enters his life will feel that not in his coldness, but in his calm, not in his indifference, but in his standards. She'll feel the gravity of a man who doesn't fear losing anyone who can't respect his presence, because he's already lost the version of himself who used to tolerate less than he gave, and that loss was the greatest gain of his life. And you'll be too far gone, too focused, too elevated to even notice. And when you reach that point, the only thing you'll wish is that you had this clarity sooner, that someone had handed you the roadmap out of that emotional chaos earlier. And that's why the Stoic relationship blueprint exists, because this isn't just a book. It's the timeless field guide for men who are ready to reclaim their peace, rebuild their power, and master their emotions. It's filled with direct Stoic truths that apply to your relationships, your focus, your mindset, and your entire identity. And for the first time ever, it's now available in audiobook form, so you don't even need to stop your day to consume it. You can listen while walking, jogging, training, or even driving. This isn't just something you read once and forget. This is something you'll return to every time life tries to pull you back into the noise, because it'll be yours forever, always ready when you need to hear the truth again. Click the link in the comments and grab the Stoic Relationship Blueprint today. Your future self will thank you. Number 2. What's really happening inside her? You think she's moved on, but here's the truth. Most men never realize she didn't walk away in peace. She walked away expecting you to collapse. The silence isn't her detaching, it's her baiting. She disappears, not to forget you, but to test you. She wants to see if you'll still orbit her, even when she's no longer present. She's not gone, she's calculating. And while you're over there blaming yourself, writing drafts, you'll never send stalking her stories, and wondering if that last meme she posted was about you. She's waiting, watching, predicting. And the moment you crack, the moment you reach out, that moment, she confirms what she suspected, that you still don't value yourself enough to walk away from someone who plays with your presence. She gets her confirmation, and she resets the power. Now you're back where she wants you. Predictable, emotional, dependent. And all it took was a bit of silence. What you call her moving on is often just her stepping back to see if you'll still crawl the modern dynamic rewards, emotional detachment. And most women are taught not to speak to resolve, but to withdraw to provoke. And the ones who master it don't need to scream or block. They simply stop and wait. They know how it works. They've seen it before. He stops hearing from her. He starts reaching out more. She starts pulling away. He starts chasing harder, and it becomes a game where his sanity is the prize. But what happens when you stop playing? What happens when the silence stretches and you don't break? She panics because the game doesn't make sense anymore. She expected drama. She got discipline. She expected regret. She got routine. She expected pain. She got peace. And that unsettles her, because her power never came from being worthy. It came from being needed. and you refusing to need her exposes everything behind her quiet exit. You think she's moved on because you're hurting and she's smiling on Instagram, but the reality is she's not over it. She's just rehearsed it. She's been through this before. She knows how to fake healed while still stalking your likes and checking if you've unfollowed her, because that's how shallow modern validation is. It's not about missing you. It's about managing the image of missing nothing, and when you don't reach out, when you don't flinch, her confidence starts to shake, not in a dramatic way, but in subtle cracks. She starts to wonder, did he really let go that fast? Was I not that special? Does he not care? And those questions become noise in her head, louder than the silence you left her with. And she'll never admit it, because pride won't let her. But she feels it. She feels the shift and starts doing things to get your attention. Indirectly, posting thirst traps, quoting vague captions, tagging her friends, pretending she's booked, busy and healed. But if she really moved on, she wouldn't need to be seen, and if she really found better, she wouldn't need to make sure you know, and yet you do, because her behavior betrays her confidence. Now, here's where your power begins. You don't react to it. You observe it. You don't decode it. You ignore it. You don't fall for the bait. You starve the trap. Because every time you don't respond, you're teaching her that your peace is no longer on her leash. You're not the man who once craved closure or begged for conversation. You've become the man who lives above it, not emotionally dead, just emotionally unavailable to drama. And what does she do when she realizes she no longer triggers you? She panics. She questions everything. And that's when the messages come, not because she wants you, but because she wants the control back. But you don't owe her that anymore. Not a reply, not a reaction, not a response. Your silence is not a tantrum, it's a lesson. And if she can't handle it, she was never ready for the version of you that no longer compromises for connection. This is the shift most never make. They mistake silence for indifference and stoicism for numbness. But what you've done is deeper. You've stepped outside the game. You've chosen yourself, not in ego, but in evolution. And she feels it not just in your distance, but in your discipline. Because no woman forgets a man who stopped needing her to feel complete and built a life where her chaos no longer has a seat. You think she's moved on because you're quiet and she's loud, but all that noise is just insecurity dressed in attention, and you refusing to give her any is the loudest truth she can't ignore. Number 3. What you should do instead. She goes quiet. You go better not out of spite, but out of principle, because the second she stops giving you attention is the moment you stop spending your energy on anything that doesn't give you peace. And most men don't know what that even looks like, because they've never built a life where their worth wasn't based on being needed by someone else. You've been conditioned to think that your power comes from fixing or chasing or pleasing. But the second she's gone, the blueprint becomes clear. You weren't in love. You were in survival. You weren't building a bond. You were avoiding abandonment. And now that she's pulled back, the only question left is, who are you without her response? And the answer most men give is broken, weak, uncertain. But that ends today, because what you do next defines everything. Not just in relationships, but in your whole identity. If she stops texting, you don't wait. You don't reach out. You don't try to reopen closed doors. You shift inward. You pull every ounce of your focus off her and back onto yourself, and not in a cute self-care way, in a ruthless way, in a way that makes you start seeing everything you were doing wrong while trying to keep someone who didn't even value you. Right, you wake up earlier, not because you want to distract yourself, but because comfort was the drug that kept you attached to her. You hit the gym not to get her attention, but to remind yourself of what discipline feels like after months of emotional chaos. You write down your goals because you realize your time was being spent in a loop of overthinking her instead of planning your future. And now you don't beg, you build. And when the urge to check her page hits, you don't fight it with willpower. You erase the need by removing access. Delete the number, unfollow, block if needed. Not because you're petty, but because your peace is not worth gambling for a dopamine hit. And if she messages you, you don't respond. Not immediately, not with explanation, and definitely not with emotion, because you don't owe a reaction to the same person who made you question your value in silence, and you start building your system, a system of daily habits that make your emotions irrelevant, because emotional men lose, not because they're not strong, but because they let the world pull their strings. And a man who moves based on impulse is a man that's always a step behind. But now you're not reacting, you're reprogramming everything. Your diet, your sleep, your schedule, your inputs. You stop watching content that keeps you addicted to the fantasy of her, and start feeding your mind with ideas that teach you how to detach from needing anyone. And if your friends still talk about her, change your circle, because elevation requires insulation. And no, you're not healing, you're evolving. Healing implies she broke you, but now you see that she didn't break you. She revealed you. She revealed the cracks, the places where you outsourced your confidence to her compliments, where you built your day around her availability, where you let her silence dictate your self-esteem, and you close those gaps with action, not affirmation, action that doesn't need applause, action that doesn't wait for inspiration, action that grinds even when you're tired, because this isn't about bouncing back. It's about never being broken the same way again. And every time you want to check on her, you remind yourself that no one who truly valued you would ever leave you confused, and the moment you internalize, that is the moment she loses power. Not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped needing her to validate your worth. You now validate it yourself with every decision you make, every dollar you earn, every pound you lift, every book you finish. And when she comes back, and she will, you won't be angry. You won't even be cold. You'll just be indifferent. Not because you're numb, but because the version of you she ghosted doesn't exist anymore. He was replaced with a man who realized that love without clarity is manipulation, and relationships without respect are distractions. And the next time someone tries to use distance as a strategy to test your value, you won't panic. You'll pass the test by walking away without a word, because the real flex is not moving on. It's outgrowing the need to prove your worth to someone who lost access to it. And if she can't match your focus, she's not qualified for your future, and you don't need to explain that. You just need to become it. And now you're not building for her. You're building for the man. You said you'd become the man who doesn't react. He recalibrates the man who doesn't chase. He chooses the man who doesn't break. He builds, and from this day forward, you never again let someone else's silence make you forget your value. You let their absence remind you of your standard, and when they disappear, you disappear deeper into your growth, and what you find there will make you thank the day she stopped replying. Number 4. How power quietly shifts. Most guys don't get it. They think power is about doing more when it's really about doing less. But with purpose, they think if they post more, show off, more, reach out more, they'll win her back, or at least get her to notice them again. But the truth is, the man who holds the most power isn't the one who reacts. He's the one who doesn't flinch. And when she goes silent and you stop responding, not out of bitterness but out of clarity, the power dynamic starts to flip. Not because you're playing games, but because you're playing real life. Where energy goes, attention follows. And when she stops hearing from you, the illusion she fed herself about how easy it would be to move on begins to fracture, not in some theatrical way, but in the quiet moments when she wonders if you're actually gone, not just physically, but emotionally. Because what most women rely on is the idea that you'll still care, even after they act like they don't. And when you stop caring, or more accurately stop showing that you care, you reclaim control not over her, but over your center. You stop being emotionally hijacked by her silence, and start anchoring yourself in discipline, in focus, in execution. Because when you're not texting her, you're reading. When you're not checking her story, you're checking your accounts. When you're not waiting for her reply, you're lifting your standards, your schedule, your income. And that's the shift from emotional pursuit to directional growth. And she feels it, not just because you're not around, but because her old tactics aren't working anymore. She used to be able to get your attention by disappearing. Now she disappears, and you disappear further into your purpose. She used to be able to guilt-trip you with passive aggression. Now you don't respond at all. And she used to know how to keep you in emotional limbo. Now you've closed the loop and returned to yourself. And the irony is, the more you pull back, the more she starts pushing subtly at first. Maybe a vague story aimed at getting you to bite. And when that doesn't work, the reach-out comes. Not because she misses you, but because she misses the control. And this is where most men lose it, because they see her message and think it means progress. But it's only progress if you've progressed past needing her to feel progress in your own life. If not, you'll repeat the loop, you'll respond, you'll explain, you'll emotionally vomit everything you've been holding in, and she'll vanish again with more power than before. But if you've grown, you don't flinch. Not because you hate her, but because you love your peace more than the potential of her presence. And this is what she wasn't ready for: a man who didn't pause his life when she left, a man who didn't keep the seat warm in case she came back, a man who didn't take her silence as a mystery to solve, but a decision to respect. And that kind of response breaks her script, because she's used to men who panic, who spiral, who compete with the ghost of her attention. But you don't compete, you don't beg, you don't explain, because every time you don't respond, you teach her that leaving you has a cost, not one you yell about, not one you threaten, just one you live out through results, through presence, through calm. And that's what shifts the power, not arrogance, but accountability, not indifference, but elevation. And now you're not worried about what she thinks, you're too locked in on how you think. Because that's the real shift, when you stop asking, what does she want? And start asking, what do I need? Not emotionally, not romantically, but strategically. What habits do I need to adopt? What distractions do I need to cut? What vision do I need to reinforce? And you build from there, brick by brick, silence by silence. And before long, she's not the focus. She's just a chapter, and not even the best one. And when she sees you again, if she does, she won't recognize the man who now walks without hesitation, who speaks without seeking approval, who loves without losing himself. And she might try to come back, but this time you won't be waiting, because the man she once left behind isn't checking his phone anymore. He's checking his goals. And when a man is in that state, no one can shift his direction, because he's no longer led by emotions. He's led by design. And the only people who stay in his life are the ones who can add value to that path, not distract him from it. Number 5. Signs the shift is working. You don't check her page anymore, not because you've blocked her out of anger, but because you've outgrown the need to monitor someone who made a decision to leave you in confusion. You no longer need to analyze her photos, her captions, her silence, because you've realized that the only thing worth analyzing is why you ever gave so much of yourself to someone who gave you so little in return. The shift is not loud, it's internal. It's the moment you go from questioning why she did it to understanding that her choices reflect her character, not your worth. You stop seeking explanations because you finally started listening to what her absence already told you, and the power doesn't come from pretending you're over it. It comes from building a life so full of direction that you don't have space for unresolved questions. And now the things that used to break you don't even move you. You see the old photos and feel nothing. Not because you're numb, but because you've healed. And your healing didn't come from closure. It came from choosing yourself again and again, even when it hurt. And the man you were back then would have dropped everything to chase just one more conversation. But you're not that man anymore, because now you know that any relationship that requires you to abandon your self-respect to keep it alive is not a relationship worth fighting for. And the moment you realize that, you stop reacting, you stop hoping, and you start building a world that doesn't collapse when someone exits, and the shift starts to show up in everything. Your walk changes, your tone changes, your tolerance for nonsense disappears, and people start noticing. They see the confidence, they hear it in your silence, they feel it in your boundaries. And that's when she starts to notice too. Not because you posted something to get her attention, but because you stopped posting for her attention altogether. And when she reaches out, even if she does, you don't jump, you don't explain, you don't re-enter the conversation that almost destroyed you, and not because you're bitter, but because you're better. You now see what you couldn't before. How she used silence as control, how she turned absence into leverage, how she left doors half open so you'd never fully move on. And now you've slammed those doors, not with rage but with finality. You've stopped waiting for her to realize your worth and started living like you know it already, and that's when everything changes. You no longer need her to come back to feel closure, because you've given it to yourself by outgrowing the need for her apology, by outworking the pain, by showing up for yourself in ways you used to show up for her. And now you're focused not just on healing, but on dominating every area of your life, your finances, your fitness, your friendships, your future. And you don't get thrown off by her games anymore. You don't get pulled into emotional traps or nostalgic spirals, because the vision in front of you is too strong to be distracted by what's behind you. And this isn't fake strength. It's real. It's earned. It's built through every sleepless night. You chose discipline over despair. Every moment you could have texted her, but instead wrote your goals every time you chose clarity over chaos. And every small win added up to the point where you no longer question if you're enough. You know it. And the more you grow, the more her silence looks like a gift, not a punishment. The more you realize that her leaving forced you to find the version of you that was never going to show up as long as you kept shrinking to be loved. And now you don't shrink anymore. You expand unapologetically. You take up space. You say no without guilt. You choose your peace, even if it means walking alone, and the signs are everywhere. You don't talk about her anymore, not because it doesn't matter, but because it no longer defines you. Your energy is invested not in memories, but in milestones. And your standards are so high now that most people can't even get close, not because you've closed off, but because you've finally opened up to what you deserve. And when people ask what changed, you don't say her name. You say your decision to stop chasing love that made you question yourself. You say your decision to stop being a man who could be emotionally manipulated by silence, and instead become the man who uses silence as a space to sharpen his focus. And this shift, it's irreversible. Because once you've felt what it's like to be centered, nothing chaotic is attractive anymore. Once you've tasted peace, attention feels cheap. And once you've built a life where you are the source of your own power, you never again trade that for someone who couldn't even respect your time. And now your value doesn't rise and fall with who stays or leaves, because it's measured by your actions, your habits, your principles. And when she looks back, if she does, she'll see a man who didn't collapse when she left, who didn't beg to be seen, who didn't chase what he outgrew. And she'll realize too late that silence doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes it's the first sign of transformation, and the last time she ever had access to a version of you who was willing to settle for less than he gives. And you'll be too far gone, too focused, too elevated to even notice. If you're tired of feeling powerless every time she pulls away, if you're done begging for clarity in a world that profits from your confusion, then you already know the Stoic relationship blueprint isn't just a book. It's the weapon they never wanted you to have. Society doesn't want men emotionally sharp, stoically grounded, and unshakable. It wants you lost, addicted to the chase, easy to control, but not you, not anymore. This audiobook is packed with timeless, unshakable truths, and it's finally available for you to listen to any time, on a walk, at the gym, during that silent moment when you finally choose yourself. It's linked right now in the comments. If you're ready to reclaim your mind, your emotions, and your future, comment, "I choose clarity." Hit the like button and subscribe so more men like you find this truth before it's too late.